Good morning. Welcome to our multi-platform service for the Unitarian Church of Staten Island. We're so grateful to have you join us. For those here in person, it's wonderful to see you. Please keep your masks on throughout the service. Maintain social distancing. Keep seated, and this one's going to be hard. Try not to form lines. During this service, all music will be performed by Eleanor Sokol, our guest musician today, and our choir. We encourage you to listen and follow along silently, singing with your hearts. For those joining online, we send special greetings to you. And we hope that you take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box this morning. After service, all are invited to Coffeeless Coffee Hour. Those online will have a virtual coffee hour. Those here in person are invited to the parish hall to sit on chairs in circles for conversation and reflection. So I'm beginning the welcome section of our service. Welcome again, everyone. It's such a joy to worship together. Today's service follows up on the September UN Sunday service at which Alison Hess of the Unitarian Universalist Office of the UN talked about climate justice, food equity, and sustainability. This morning, I asked you to contemplate food waste and food insecurity at home, meaning in your kitchen, your home in Staten Island or nearby, and your home on this earth. And I hope we will provide you with some ideas about actions you can take to address both. In doing so, we are focusing on our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So happy Thanksgiving. Was it a happy one? Yeah. I see a lot of nodding and I hear a yes. Great. It's my favorite holiday because of the food, but also because of the family and because it's a time to give thanks, including for the abundance of the earth. Today's opening words are an excerpt from a blog by a group called Native Hope. There is little coverage of the fact that November is Native American Heritage Month, or that the day after, known to most as Black Friday, is Native American Heritage Day. This time of year and these two holidays, Thanksgiving and Native American Heritage Day, give us the opportunity to reflect on our collective history and to celebrate the beauty, strength, and resilience of the native tribes of North America. We remember the generosity of the Wampanoag tribe to the helpless settlers. We remember the hundreds of thousands of Native Americans who lost their lives at the hands of colonialists and the genocide of whole tribes. We remember the vibrant and powerful Native descendants, families, and communities that persist to this day throughout the culture and the country. We remember people like Sharice Davids, a Native American congresswoman from Kansas, and Interior Secretary Deborah Haaland, who became the first Native American woman to serve as a cabinet secretary. Larry Schwabacker will now conduct the chalice lighting. We both had a little trouble with this morning, so I'm here to assist.
All right. Actually, look at this.
This is the part we had trouble with. That sounded good.
Church is over. Well, 3 hours later, we're still sitting here.
These are old matches, I think.
I say we should talk to the match committee.
The match committee needs to buy more matches.
Mm.
Yes. Success.
Well, not yet. Let's
Almost.
want it.
All right. Let me that.
Yeah.
Of course, now won't go out.
All right. Can't win.
All right. Let me
That's
try.
teach me not to come to church every week.
All right. Let me try. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. I'm gonna hold on to this light.
All right,
Let
we
me
did
hold on
it.
to this. Go
All
ahead.
right. In the search for truth and the spirit of love, we unite in fellowship, worship and fellowship. Okay, as an extension of lighting our chalice, we will now take a moment to light these candle for some of those who recently was affected by police brutality. We cannot say all of the names of those affected. All right, we light the candle for the life of Yvette Smith. We light this candle for the light of Miriam Carey, and this candle for the life of Shelley Frey. May these lights be the symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice as we proclaim Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Larry. Our opening hymn is number 38, Morning Has Broken. Now is the time in our service for joys and sorrows. If you're visiting with us for the first time, this is the time where you can introduce yourself. For those gathering in person, we invite you to raise your hand, and when called on, say your name and your joy or sorrow. I will then repeat it for those in our online audience. For those joining online, we invite you to type into the chat your joys and sorrows, and Mike Stein will read them aloud. Larry, go ahead.
I know, I just started to stay up here. I just wanted to,
Go to the mic.
Oh, that would help.
Might as well.
I'm learning, right? You think a theater person wouldn't have problems. I just wanted to let people know, not everybody knows, but I have actually started dialysis on 2019, December. But the joy I have is to tell you that I've actually got on the list at Mount Sinai to get a kidney. So I'm still looking, but I'm getting there.
We just heard from Larry Schwabacher, who reminded us that he's been on dialysis since 2019, but that he has a joy. He's now on the list at Mount Sinai for a kidney. Anybody else have a joy or a sorrow?
First of all, the use again of the term carnival, like these animals. We would have traffickers outside. You have some people that had protests, and you had media. But when we have a gathering of ministers, pastors, and churches, it's a carnival. We're like elephants jumping through a fire hoop at a circus. And I think that this, again, is intentional wording to give the kind of signals they want.
Without her around, it wasn't really the traditional Thanksgiving with most of my family. So it was really just me and my wife. I'm very thankful for my wife to be here. But it really reminded me how much I missed her and how much her passing has separated me from a lot of my friends. I'm not going to be able to do that justice, Ben, but for those online, Ben is thankful for his wife, but remembering his much loved grandmother who died at the age of 90 this spring, and whose presence or lack of presence was very much felt at Thanksgiving by Ben and his family. I don't know what did I miss, Ben? I think I did not quite cover what you said, but I think that probably goes for a lot of us, that Thanksgiving is a time when we remember who's not at the table as much as we appreciate who is at the table. Do I have anybody else? In person, Kathy. So Kathy Santo let us know that in addition to birding, something she got into during COVID, she's also gotten into gardening, and she's harvested milkweed seeds and she's grown a lot of milkweed for the butterflies, but she's harvested marigold seeds, and she's making them available to people who are here today, and maybe on other Sundays as well. Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else? Mary. So Mary Hernandez's joy was that her daughter was home for Thanksgiving and will be back at the end of her semester, yes? In Christmas? Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Maureen. I'm sorry, Marilyn. Marilyn.
My joy is to be here today with so many friends, with so many wonderful people. I was hoping to bring our memories of the food and the pantry we used to have, and we suddenly have a service there. And so Larry, and he's here today. I was on dialysis with my mother, and I know what a difficult thing that is. I'm so glad that Larry is getting better. One of the things that I did do, we forget about things, is that I'm a member of the flower committee, and Kathy does wonderful flowers, and so many people do. If anybody feels that they want to remember anybody with flowers, I appreciate to get in touch with me or with other people, because it's such a little thing that we can do that will help people in the community and feel family. Grandmother, and certainly know what that feels like. My grandmother was a tremendous person in that family. I felt like grandmother. They didn't go to pop after that. She was a wonderful woman, and I felt when she died, I felt like there was nobody else. And then I remembered that I'm part of the continuum. I'm so glad I'm and if anybody wants, I'm not back flowers, but they don't have to be live. So if you have any artificial flowers, you can make things.
You want to bring that up, Marilyn? Okay, I will try to summarize what Marilyn just said. Prompt me if I leave things out. Marilyn was happy to see that Larry was here and was reminding us about what a difficult thing dialysis is. She was talking about her grandmother. It was prompted by what Ben said in his sorrow. She mentioned that she's the chair of the flower committee and reminded everyone that if they want someone remembered through flowers, that they should reach out to her. I think that's it. Mike, do you have anything in the chat?
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Can you tell us who might be online, just so that we know who's there?
Kate is online. Cassie, Harry Hicks, Victoria, David Jones, Suzanne Callahan, and Jennifer Hyman.
Very good, thank you. So our main focus today is on food insecurity here in Staten Island, but as a 30-year veteran of the New York City Department of Sanitation, I really can't talk about food insecurity without also talking about food waste. And these issues are obviously inextricably linked. At least a quarter of the waste that American households toss into the garbage is food. It's estimated that 1/3 of the produce grown in the world is thrown away. And it's not just households. Farmers and grocery stores and restaurants and food producers all toss a lot of food. Even if we're careful about buying, there are always food scraps. This fact, and the fact that there is also so much food in our waste stream, is why the New York City Department of Sanitation has a pilot underway that I'm sure you're all familiar with, to get New York City residents to separate their food waste so that it can be collected to create energy or compost. It's also why the city now requires many commercial generators of food waste. That's large stores and restaurants and cafeterias and businesses that manufacture or serve large quantities of food to either donate that food so that it can be eaten by humans or failing that animals, or arrange for it to be processed to create energy or composted. So we all have a role in preventing food waste, whether we buy food to eat at home or at restaurants or elsewhere. And you have a handout that provides you with some ways that you can limit the amount of food that goes to waste. You know, these are all obvious and they're things that I try to do, but can't always do. I just forgot about a pineapple and threw out an entire pineapple this morning. So moving on to the reading. The poem Remember by Joy Harjo is a beautiful poem, but I chose it because its structure relies on the word remember. Yeah. I hope you think of this poem and Larry Schwabacker's reading of it when you buy produce at the green market or grocery, when the server removes your plate at a restaurant, and when you have to throw away food or food scraps. Not when you're eating. Please, no, enjoy your food. Okay. Joy Harjo was born with the name Joy Foster in Oklahoma. She's a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. When she was 19, she changed her surname to Harjo, which means brave in Muskogee. Since the late 1970s, she has regularly published poetry, and her writing explores themes of the natural world and Native American storytelling and traditions. She's an activist for Native American rights and gender equality. She was appointed U.S. Poet Laureate in 2019, the first Native American to take that role. And in addition to writing poetry, she is an accomplished singer and saxophonist and has written children's books, and she published an autobiography called Crazy Brave in 2012. So, without further ado, Larry will read Remember by Joy Harjo.
Remember that you were born under know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon who knows who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn, and that is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to the night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath, and you are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, he is yours life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Let's turn the page. Sorry. Oh, come on. Okay. Sucks. Okay. Remember the plants, trees, animals' life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of the universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from you this. Remember, dance language is, and that life is. Remember.
Now is the time in our order of service where we take an offering. We know it is the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those in person, we invite you to drop your offering into the basket on the left of the stage as you exit into the parish hall after service. For those online, links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate to our PayPal giving page. Please give as generously as you can. Your offering will be gratefully received. Thank you, Eleanor. I will now take a few moments to tell you about our speaker, Susan Fowler. Many of you probably know her. She's lived in Staten Island for 30 years. And for 10 of those years, she worked as the City Harvest Healthy Neighborhood Manager. I know she worked on at least one project with Mary Hernandez. And she and her husband also have a website building business. And he and she worked on our website over the years. She has a master's degree from in ESL from Fairleigh Dickinson, and she also teaches online at Fairleigh Dickinson a course called Human Factors. Right now, she's an officer of the Staten Island Hunger Task Force, which she will tell you all about. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Let me start by asking you a question. Where does food insecurity live on Staten Island? Let me define food insecurity, though. According to the USDA, a person is considered to be suffering from food insecurity if they meet any of these criteria. She worries that food will run out before she gets money to buy more food, that she cannot afford to eat balanced meals, or that an adult in her household has cut the size of meals or skipped meals because there isn't enough money for food. Our part of the island, the North Shore, is known to have high levels of poverty, poor health outcomes, and if you don't have a car, limited access to healthy food. People on the South Shore and Mid-Island are thought to be rich, healthy, and food secure. Neither characterization is completely accurate. A few months after Hurricane Sandy, the minister at the Woodrow Methodist Church on the South Shore set up a disguised pantry. She said that some of the people in her area were sitting in the dark with no heat and no food in their homes because they only had enough money for the mortgage, but they were too proud to go to a pantry. So what she did was invite people to game nights at the church, and she'd feed them and have raffles and bingos. The prizes were baskets of food. During the pandemic, many people discovered that they'd fallen off the edge. They'd lost their jobs, they had no savings, and their cupboards were bare. Between April and August 2020, I answered calls from people from all 5 boroughs who, when the stay-at-home orders came down from Albany, found that they would soon be out of food and had no way to get more. At the time, I was working for City Harvest. This was my COVID job at City Harvest. And City Harvest is New York's largest food rescue organization. About 1 in 10 calls were from people concerned about their friends, neighbors, parents, or grandparents. For example, one woman called, somewhat exasperated, for a pair of neighbors. She said, they say that they're fine, but they have dementia, so they probably aren't. I gave her the number of the information for the New York City Get Food free food deliveries. All they would have to do is open the door. We got a call from a man on Staten Island. His next door neighbor had just moved to the US from Albania, had a family, was about to lose his job, knew very little English, and had no food. I found 2 pantries that would deliver boxes of food, one that day and the other the following week. The neighbor agreed to coordinate the deliveries and translate if needed. Sometimes the neighbors weren't so friendly. A Haitian woman living in Rossville mentioned that her white neighbors treated her disdainfully, crossing the street if she came outside. I found her some pantries, and when I called back a few weeks later to see if we had helped her, she said, yes, you did help me with the food. I was so scared back then. I am very aware of how many people are hunters looking for the weaknesses in others. She added, but things are changing, thank God, because of the George Floyd protests, she said. We've just been holding that pain. That pain has got to go. Equality isn't enough, we need equity. If one of us can't breathe, we're all affected. A nurse from Jamaica, Queens called. Her COVID patient was recently released from the hospital, had no food in the house and no money. He didn't want to tell her what bad shape he was in, but she managed to get the truth out of him. I gave her some pantries and volunteer delivery options for her client and ended by saying, please tell him from me that there are many people in his situation and that the staff at most pantries bend over backwards to be helpful and reassuring. Once he's well and whole again, he can pay it forward. The idea of the pay it forward response came from emergency food provider colleagues on Staten Island. In the weeks after Hurricane Sandy, members of the Staten Island Hunger Task Force, a consortium of food pantries, soup kitchens, and other nonprofits, met to talk about what they were seeing at their pantries. One pantry leader said, "We have people on the line who are in tears. They'd say, 'I used to be the person donating to food pantries. How can I be taking from a pantry now?' Another pantry leader said, 'We're seeing people who are very angry because they don't want to be here and they pick fights.'" Elaine Smith, the local psychotherapist, took us through some methods for reducing tension on the line. One of her suggestions was to point out to the clients that the situation wasn't permanent and that when they were back on their feet, they could help others. There is a curious warning in Hebrews 13:2. "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." During COVID, angels showed up, but I don't think that they knew that that's what they were. For example, a woman who lived alone in Eltingville called, and by the time she reached me, she was frantic. She said, "I have $8 in my checking account." She was HIV positive and had been trying unsuccessfully to get disability, thwarted at every point by bureaucracy. I gave her the name, location, and times for a pantry nearby, but also called Community Health Action of Staten Island, abbreviated CHASI for her, which had started doing emergency deliveries. By the end of our conversations, it took a few to figure out the delivery schedule. She was calmer and more herself. CHASI's team delivered boxes to her within a day. Surely angels were at play. So the answer to the question, where does food insecurity live on Staten Island, is everywhere. And it's not always obvious, even to the people who are food insecure. A friend told me that when she was a child, her parents fed her potatoes for a week straight. They used a different recipe every night, she said. Mashed potatoes, potato soup, potatoes au gratin. I thought it was great. I love potatoes. But in hindsight, she said, I see that potatoes was all they could afford that week. I didn't think we were poor, but we must have been. Food insecurity is widespread in certain neighborhoods and census tracts. The population of the West Brighton NYCHA houses, which is its own census tract, was 51% food insecure in 2013. But it also affects individuals in rich areas throughout the island. Some of those affected would rather starve than show up at a pantry, or at least that's what they say. This is why community refrigerators like the ones at the West Brighton houses and in Mariners Harbor are so helpful. You can pick up food day or night and no one is there to see you. Heather Butts of Health for Youth has been turning her group's little libraries into little libraries and pantries. Same idea. Many of the pantries on Staten Island have signed up to the Plentiful app, which lets people make appointments to pick up food and avoid the lines and loss of privacy. The JCC on Manor Road has been bringing people in by appointment only for years now. Privacy concerns or not, though, the number of people who have been using pantries on Staten Island has at least quintupled, from 100 to 500 people a day at Community Health Action on Richmond Terrace, for example, and the numbers have not come down much. Like Sarah said, you can help by donating food, money, and other goods to the local pantries. And that's, you can see on the handout, the pantries that there are on Staten Island, all the different neighborhoods. Money is especially helpful because pantries can buy food at a deep discount. Your dollars go further. Gift cards are helpful because they let people buy culturally appropriate food on their own. You can't find mole sauce or jollof rice at a pantry, but you can buy it at Western Beef. And donations of pet food and sanitary items like tampons, toilet paper, and diapers are especially helpful because the pantries can't buy those items, and you can't use SNAP or food stamps to buy them either. The Federal Women, Infants, and Children program lets mothers buy baby formula, but formula is so expensive that they can't afford much of anything else after they pay for the formula. So thank you for considering our call to fill the West Brighton NYCHA houses and Mariners Harbor community refrigerators. I believe Sarah's talked about this in the past, and thank you for listening. I hope I've given you some useful ideas, and I'll certainly be around after the service for questions.
Thank you, Susan. I do have some information about that community fridge in the handout. I think it's on the other side of the handout that you should have at your seat. You know, it's open, as Susan said, it's filling a great need at that housing project. It's open 24 hours a day. And when we've looked at it, you know, I've gone to visit it a couple times, it's mostly empty. There's some canned food on this top shelf. There might be a box of sweet potatoes, but either they stock it all the time and it's people run through it, or it's just not very well stocked. Let me know if you're interested to target our food donations to that need. Obviously, that's probably something that we would have to talk to the board about before we make a project of it. But I think it would be a good way to build community. And I think it would be a good way to target what we buy rather than choosing random items and donating them to a pantry. We can provide what they actually say they need. The things they're suggesting are shelf-stable milk, eggs. The kids like hot dogs and rolls, bread, the kinds of things that you're not getting at a pantry, basically. I will post this info in our newsletter again and ask for your help again to see if there's an interest in getting something started. Our closing hymn is Blue Boat Home, number 1064. Larry will now extinguish the chalice.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to repeat the line after I say it. We extinguish the chalice, but not the light of truth,
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth,
or the warmth of community,
or the warmth of community,
or the fire of commitment.
or the fire of commitment.
For these we carry in our hearts,
For these we carry in our hearts,
until we are together again.
until we are together again.
I can't win. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
If you retain one word from today's service, it should be remember. Remember that we are in this together. Our lives, our communities, and what we experience in this world will continue to change for the better because of you and your efforts. Or as Joy Harjo said better, remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember.